Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another faculty interview. My name is Katie, and I am the grad assistant for the library science program. And today I get to interview Dr. Soulen, and it's going to be a really fun time to get to know a little bit more about her. So thanks for joining me today. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. What brought you into the field of librarianship?
Well, I was a classroom teacher. I taught fourth and fifth grade for many years. And then I was lucky enough to join a cohort of classroom teachers who were being trained as school librarians. So that was supported by my school district. They needed school librarians, and so I became part of that. And after that, after I finished that program, actually before I finished that program, I became a librarian in a middle school in my district.
That's awesome. So you
Mhm.
saw a need, an opportunity, and you pursued it and ended up loving it.
Exactly. And it's great because, I love teaching, I love children, I love books, but when you get into the library, you also have the technology end of it too. So that was just one step further.
Mm, that's really, really interesting to hear. Those are things that people outside of the field, like, you don't think about all those aspects. So
Mhm.
yeah, and give you probably a really well-rounded perspective that way.
And a school library is just the biggest and best classroom in the school.
Mm,
So you're still a teacher, but you also get to be a librarian.
so it's best of both worlds for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. So in a similar sense, is your background mainly in school libraries, or do you have other experience in public or academic libraries?
So I am a school librarian. I also work with public libraries, children's services. My background is in curriculum and instruction. So I have a PhD in curriculum and instruction from Old Dominion University.
Wow. Wow, that is a very needed job, and I'm sure you're really good at it. That's cool.
Yes, yes.
So prior to starting at the university level, what was your librarianship experience like?
Oh, wow. I was in the best school. I was in a middle school. So we had sixth through eighth grade. I love middle schoolers.
Mhm.
They need their librarian. So we had about, I want to say 900 students in my school. It was an urban school district.
Mhm.
It was a very diverse group of students, which was great. Um, and our library was highly used in my school. Anytime you walked into my library, there would be so many children in there, working on the computers, checking out books, working on special projects. So it was a very, very busy environment, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, it sounds like you were really able to be like in the heartbeat of the school in that way.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, and I can remember, I feel like whenever I was in middle school, I loved the library and the librarian. So I'm sure that you really had an impact on a lot of those students
Mhm.
then.
And also, I went out into the classrooms and taught lessons in the classrooms with the teachers.
Mm,
I had my morning news show that I did with my kids. I love that too.
that's fun.
And we had the book club that met after school too. So there's a lot more to it than just teaching in the library. There's just many ways to reach out to your students.
That's really cool to hear. What a fun job. Um, what specifically are you passionate about regarding the field of librarianship?
Well, obviously, school libraries. I
Hmm.
think that's obvious. Collaborating with classroom teachers. That is really the thing that I am most interested in. How do we work out those relationships so that we're teaching content area skills through our library instruction, and that they're also learning information literacy as part of their regular courses. Um, I'm also really interested in collaborations between public library children's services and school librarians. I think there's a lot that can be done in that area.
Okay. Yeah, so all these partnerships, it seems
Mhm,
like in order to really make sure that you're delivering the best service to children and families.
Making those connections, yes.
Mm, that's good to hear. So, kind of moving into maybe your role as now a faculty member, what is the
Mhm.
best advice you could give your MLS students?
Oh, wow. I would say keeping up with the assignments and knowing what is coming up next. I know that so many of my students are so busy. They have home lives, they have work lives, they have lives as students. So trying to organize your time and knowing where we are going from here. So kind of looking at how the different assignments connect from where we begin at the beginning of this semester as we progress toward the end of the semester.
Yes, that is really good advice. Speaking as a current graduate student, obviously I'm not in the MLS program, but you got to have that eye forward. Otherwise, something's going to catch you off guard, and it could really
Yeah, and
throw
also making those connections from the courses that you took earlier in the program to those that you take later in the program. For me, I teach courses that come toward the end of the program, and a lot of my students say, "Oh, wow, this is the first course I've taken that's specifically for school librarians." And I'm like, yes, because you're making those connections from the broad field of librarianship down to the more narrow field of school librarianship.
That makes sense. Okay, what else would you want students to know about earning an MLS from ECU?
Well, I think they should know that the faculty at ECU are fabulous. Uh, those of us who teach in this program, we work really well together. We are collaborative. We connect to each other. We get along well with each other. We enjoy each other's company. I'm not sure the students get to see that part of it all the time. So I think it comes through, though, in the quality of the teaching that the students receive, because it's not just me behind this course, it's the entire faculty behind the course.
Okay. Yeah, so that collaboration amongst all of the faculty members makes it so valuable. Even
Yes.
in now kind of an online program, that still is really, really enriching the process.
I think it maybe even enriches it more in an online program. I think there's a certain connectedness that goes on simply because we're an online program. We have to lean on each other a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. I currently am in an online program as well, and I totally can see how that would be so valuable. We need that connection.
And I would encourage my students to do the same too. Get to know the other students in your courses, make connections with them, use social media to make those connections and have a cohort that goes along with you through the program so you have people to lean on too.
Yeah, that is a really, really good idea. Okay, so what courses, you said you teach them at the end. What are the courses you are most likely to be teaching in the program?
So I teach the Instructional Foundations for Media Coordinators course, which is one of the last courses that the school librarian concentration students take. I also teach materials for children and materials for young adults, which is for both school librarians and public librarians who are doing children's services. And a new course that I will be developing, hopefully for the future, is materials for early childhood. So I think that's for the pre-K crowd, and it's also for public librarians who are doing children's programming.
Wow, yeah. So you got your hands in with like making some more curriculum, and obviously that's in your background already. And in those other courses, that's where students can most likely find you.
And reading lots of books, lots and lots and lots of children's and young adult books.
Yep. Yes. Can confirm as the grad assistant.
Yes, you can.
Okay, well, whenever you are teaching a class, what is your teaching approach?
I like to be student-centered. I'm always trying to look for the authentic learning task. A lot of my students, by the time they get to my courses, are already either in the public library or in the school library working in the field. So I want my assignments that I give to my students to be assignments that they can do in their library setting, something that they can either use directly teaching in their library or put it in their back pocket as something that they can use as a lesson plan or a lesson or a program for their library sometime in the future.
So really preparing your students for their real life work, for really being out in the field.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
That's so important. So then whenever a student is taking your class, obviously they're going to get that like real life preparedness. But what else could a student expect when taking one of your courses?
So I have high expectations, and I assume that you're going to spend time on your coursework. However, I also try to provide as many opportunities for help with that as I possibly can. So many ways to connect from me to my students, and then from my students when they need help connecting back to me. So the more ways I can provide that, the better in my courses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having those high expectations is going hand in hand with you really wanting to prepare students and make sure that they are well-rounded when exiting the program.
When they step out into the world, yes. And when I see them again, and I will see a lot of my students again when I go to conferences or traveling around to different school districts, I do run into my students or I hear about them through publications or conferences or other professors that I know in the field. So I will see them. And when I see them again, I want to say, hey, I'm proud of you. You did a great job in our program.
Yes. So still having that connection, and you aren't just leaving students out to flounder. Like you have high expectations, but you're really there to support them and help them
That's our
reach their
goal. Yep.
potential.
hmm
That's cool and good to hear. So moving maybe away from teaching a little bit, what about research? What are your research interests?
So my research interests center around school libraries and public libraries, children's services, certainly. Uh, I am very much interested in collaborations. So collaborations between librarians and teachers, or between public librarians and the adults who are caring for the children that come to their programs. I'm also interested in transformation in the libraries. So, for example, COVID is a perfect example of that. What did libraries look like prior to COVID? What are we doing during the COVID pandemic? And then what do we think that's going to look like after the pandemic ends? And do we think there's going to be any changes that have happened during the course of that experience? So I'm always looking for those little serendipitous experiences that are going to kind of tweak and change what's happening in our libraries.
Yeah, that's a really great question to ask right now. And it'll be interesting even seeing how, we're interviewing right now in the middle of COVID. It'll be interesting to see kind of how even this interview goes down depending on how life goes back to normal. And, at
Mm-hmm.
this moment, there's so many questions still to ask and things to
Right.
investigate.
Right. And I have a really great survey that I'm analyzing the data for right now. It's a survey of parents of pre-K through 12th grade students to see how those children have been accessing books and comparing it to how they used to access books prior to the pandemic and then during, and then what they think will be happening when the pandemic ends. So
Wow.
that's some really interesting survey results there.
Yeah, that data could have a lot of impact on the way
Mm-hmm.
that libraries choose to move forward after everything. So I think that's super interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, what about your students? Like, do they have any opportunities to be involved in research if they're passionate about something?
Mm-hmm. So I frequently suggest to my students when I read their work and I say how this is a really interesting idea here. I really encourage them to take that and create a publication and submit it. Last year, I worked with one of the graduate assistants in our department, and she actually was one of the authors on a paper that I had published. So that was great. She was really excited about that. And I'd like to do more of that in the future too. I think involving our GAs is really important. But I also think involving our students who are not necessarily on campus and working with them to write and present at conferences and publish. That's a wonderful goal to have.
Yeah, so there are opportunities, they're available to the students, and you would love to see that and support that.
Mhm. Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, we just have one more question to wrap up the interview. It's a little less formal, and I'm just wondering what is a fun fact about you that you would want students to know?
Well, when I am not teaching and I'm not researching, I enjoy artwork of many kinds. I do oil painting and watercolors, and you can see behind me is my background that I created uh, for this type of recording. Um, and I'm also taking a pottery class right now at Emerge Galleries here in Greenville, so that's fun too.
That's awesome. So you're very artistic.
It's a great way to relax. Yep.
Mm, yeah, I can understand that. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I know that this is going to be so beneficial for current students, people who want to be in the program, even alums. I think knowing a little bit about you and the way you work and your history, I think is so beneficial. So I really appreciate you taking this time.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Of course.